wanted to, the power of books is, I was thinking about what got me on the path of my life, where my entire life I've worked for nature, to protect it and to educate about it. I mean, since I was at 9 years old, I knew I had a vision that I was going to do this my whole life, and I did. And I think one of the main things that helped me, I had incredible mentors and teachers who taught me growing up. My grandfather, my uncle, my father, and they were all in my life big time. Another man named Bo Almroth. I write about all of that in the book. And they took me out and taught me nature skills and living off the land. And it was, and one of the things I talk about in the book a lot too is how we're losing today the art of being mentors and being elders. And it's not just that young people aren't looking to mentors and to elders, but people aren't owning and becoming mentors and elders. It's leaving our world, and it's a damage. And I said, and for the learning about nature, it's vital. And I remember growing up, the other thing I've noticed, I work with kids a lot and with parents, and this is no diss to parents, but I know the modern parent, the vast majority of them, keep their kids controlled, keep them in the house, keep them in front of those stupid cell phones, and they don't connect to nature. And the thing about nature is it's got to be personal. You can't just be intellectual. And the only way to get that as a kid, other than mentors and elders teaching you, is to just go be in nature. But it's really a lost art, and it's scaring me. And I'm hoping this book will help with that too. I had an incredible phone call the other day from a doctor who sends her kids to our school, and she said her husband and her are both doctors, and every night it's become their thing. For an hour they read to their kids when they go to sleep from this book. And I went, oh God, to hear that as somebody who wrote a book, it's mind-blowing. So I have, and I come to you tonight, there might be a few things I talk about that seem a little negative because of the day and such, but I'm a person of hope, and I have great hope, and I always have had. And another one of the things that really helped raise me when I was young, growing up, were books. And that's another thing I see disappearing, the art of reading. And here's two books that were just, these are the actual books I had when I was 10, 11, 12. You're welcome to come up after and see them. They got all beat up. This book's called The Great Auk, and this book's called The Last of the Curlews. And I remember I was about 11 when I read them. And I asked today, is there anybody in this room, question, know what the Great Auk was? Two, maybe. Does anybody in this room know what the curlew or the Eskimo curlew was? And I'm no diss to anyone. Extinct. And the Great Auk became extinct in the middle 1800s. They were a bird that lived all across the North Atlantic. They were like penguins almost. They had no fear of humans. They were about this tall. They swam magnificently, and every single one was killed. And the Eskimo curlew is a bird that would fly for over 2 continents, from the Antarctic to the tip of South America and back every year. They would fill the sky with so many birds you couldn't even see the sun. And they were both, till the last bird, wiped out. I read these as a kid, and I cried for days, but it inspired me to do what I'm doing today, what I've done my whole life. And that's the power of books. This one, How to Stay Alive in the Woods by Bradford Angier. And this is a guy that lived at a place called the Peace River up in Canada. And I remember as a kid, all the way into my adulthood, that's where I wanted to live. And I went up there, I write about it in the book, to look for the Peace River, to find a place to live when I was 17 after I got out of high school. And I didn't find it. I found another river called the Dahani, and I spent months in the wilderness surviving off the land. But it led, this book, I could track it all the way back to my childhood, and what it did for me as my adult. And I didn't get my land up there, I got my land in Mount Shasta, which I never knew. But I could track it back to this, Bradford Angier, and the skills to live off the land. This book was, you may know of a great author called Edward Abbey, one of my heroes. kind of a wild dude that lived in the Southwest and fought for the earth. One of the things he talked a lot about is he wanted to get rid of this lake called Lake Powell, which dammed up the Colorado River. And this is really interesting because I write again in the book about this, is one of my mentors growing up, my uncle, took me to a place called Glen Canyon. And it was a place, it taught me so much. It was so beautiful. It was orange and red walls going up 3,000 feet sometimes. It was amazing. And I couldn't believe it as a kid. And then it got filled up with water from the damming of the canyon. And later, a book came out from the Sierra Club called The Place No One Knew. And it was by a photographer named Elliot Porter. And it showed the beauty of that. He photographed that place before it filled with water. That got me onto my career as a photographer. And I've been a nature photographer my whole life too. So you see how these things get connected that way. It's so amazing. This book, called Never Cry Wolf, by an author named Fairleigh Moat, it was about how he lived as a scientist. He lived with a pack of wolves in Canada. I knew I wanted to live with animals my whole life. My whole life I have. This book here, called Ishi in Two Worlds. I read it at one of my most sacred places called Roosevelt Lake in the Sierra Nevada. The thing that really amazed me of this book was that Ishi was still full of love. He still had heart that was huge. And I've tried that my whole life, to have a heart that's huge. When I'm so angry a lot of the time at what happens to our planet, right? How to do both things. And I learned a lot of that from him, because in this book, really, it's the path of the heart. The Earth Caretaker Way is the path of the heart. And you have to come from that. And really, so much of it came from that book. And one of my mentors, it took me on a trip around the United States when I was 12, a man named Bo Almroth. We went to 35 states. I learned so much, and he required me to read on all the driving time. And one of the books he had me read was The Hobbit and the whole J.R.R. Tolkien series. He also had me read this book, Siddhartha, and study it, and many books like this, about Buddha. And so these books expanded me, and I had to read this book, Silent Spring. Talk about courage. This woman, Rachel Carson, wrote this book about DDT and what it was doing to our environment, killing the animals. And actually, crazy as it sounds, she was able to influence Richard Nixon to ban it. One of our craziest presidents, right? You'd never give up the fight. He banned it. And I'm sure today they'd bring it back if they could. We won't let them. But she wrote this book, and it changed the world. And she was such a simple person. But she had enough guts to do it, and it came out. So the power of books, I just believe in it so much. Earth Caretaker Way. What does it mean? What does it mean? I've had many visions about this in my life. That the purpose of the human being on the planet Earth is to be Earth caretakers. It's our gift. I mean, let that in for a minute. You don't always see it, but it is. And the part of the book, this part here, it says, walking backwards into the future and remembering what we already know. Part of my vision was our ancestors, before modern technology and modern times, they knew how to live with the earth. It's not because they were any better than us or any more gifted. They had no choice. They only had the earth. They didn't have any modern technology. But they were able to build a deep, deep personal relationship with all things earth, from insects to dirt, to the bigger animals, to the sky, to the wind, to the rain, to the storm, all the elements. Everything was personal to them. And they studied it, they paid attention to it, they loved it, they got mad at it if a big storm came. It was part of their life, and they were dependent on the earth. If they didn't pay attention, they did not live. There was no grocery store to go to, no Costco, nothing like that. And in that process, they had to be good to each other too. And I'm not saying that our ancestors were perfect people. They had flaws just like we do. They made war, they killed, they did all that. That's a human dilemma. But they had that basic, deep connection to the earth. And so all we have to do is remember what they know. It's in us. If you go back, grandmothers, grandfathers, back over and over, hundreds and thousands of years back, we're all connected to them. That memory is stored within us. And my thought is that the reason we don't connect to it more deeply is we don't go out into nature. We don't do it. And I mean, when I say go out, I mean spend quality time. Not on that phone, not with a purpose where you have to do something. Just the art of being. Everything else too. But that quality time, just the art of being. That's something that's left our culture. We don't do it. Even people, and believe me, I've worked with earth lovers my whole life. Even earth lovers don't do it a lot. We get so busy doing stuff that we forget. If you do it, and I'll back up. That's why I was talking about the kids. If the kids get the opportunity when they're young, if they don't have to work at it their whole adult life, they'll have it. It's harder when you're an adult and you have an epiphany moment and you go, wow, I want to develop my relationship with the earth. But then you have these million things in life to keep you busy, and you have all these prejudices and ideas you build up in life about the earth. Like, one of the things that keeps people away from going out into nature is judgments. And I had a spiritual teacher once that told me, you want to, probably the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life and the most worthwhile is to practice being non-judgmental. And he said it's a spiritual practice, and you might only, out of this much, you might only by the time you die achieve that much. But that much is worth it. And I realized it by studying people, because I love to study people. I think I could have been an anthropologist. I love to study people. And I've learned we judge so much about nature. The mosquitoes are going to get me. It's going to be cold. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be hard. I'm going to get lost. On and on and on. So we don't go out and just be. And we lose the gift of our lives. I mean, if you want to have love in your life, that earth is the most loving being you'll ever have. She gives us food, water, air, gravity, home, everything we need to live, and asks for nothing in return other than just basic, decent respect. That's pure love. We all crave it. We all want it. So I'm saying it starts with that foundational building of the relationship. All of this that I'm talking to you about is in the book in some form or another. I had a woman I was working with years ago in the school, the early years. The school's been around for like over 30 years now, Headwaters. And there was a woman who was a friend in the early years, and she was coming out on the land doing work with me, and she wanted to develop a deeper relationship with the earth. And she was struggling and struggling and struggling. And I kept doing everything I could do, and I always want to say, I want to defer to the greatest teacher is the earth itself, not me, the earth. The earth is the teacher. But learning to listen, to be the student, is so hard to do for so many and so important. One day after a vision quest, she was sitting out on the land for a number of days alone, just being. She comes in crying her eyes out, and I thought there was something wrong, like she got hurt or something. And she said to me that she finally realized what she'd been missing. A tree spoke to her in only a way a tree can, through feeling, and she understood the language. And it started to open up to everything in nature, in the woods. And she was crying because she was, I think, in her 40s then. She realized for 40 years she'd missed that. She hadn't gotten it. And it just grieved her greatly. And I understood that. And I'm so lucky that I didn't have that happen to me because of the way I was raised. I mean, my parents, when I was young, they'd look at me and go, get out of the house, have fun, and and maybe I'd see him at dinner time. You know? There's no cell phone to call him on and check in 20 times a day. And did I almost die 1,000 times? Yes. Did I tell my mother? No. But I'm here, right? You know, if she would have known, who knows? But and so I don't know. There's a happy in between there. I want to talk about the land in Mount Shasta that is our school and our home. Is a really, really sacred place, and it's where I wrote this book. I had a vision that it was time for me to find my land that I dreamed about from the time of that book where I read about the Peace River in Canada. And so a friend said, Mount Shasta, it's wild everywhere north of Mount Shasta, all around there, no big city. That's all I needed. And I known Mount Shasta for years, but not intimately. And so I drove up and I started looking, and I couldn't find anything. I was really frustrated. I had a wolf at the time who was with me, and a dear friend, and finally the realtor who I was working with, a very kind, wonderful person. Another word, kind, so important in this book and with nature, so important. This man, the realtor says, I just got a call about this piece of property that came up for sale. And I kind of am a very visionary person. Like if something happens like that, I don't think it's an accident. Like another teacher I had years ago said there are no accidents. So I said, okay, let's go look. I hear water and I'm going, water's huge. I love water, you know? And I get to the creek and I see this red-tailed hawk feather come floating down the creek. Center tail feather from the tail, only one like it on the bird, comes floating down the creek. And I pick it up and I go, that's a sign. And I look for sign when I make big decisions. And then I felt something. I look up in a tree, I feel something, and I see this spirit. It's the only word I can think of. And it's like a man-like figure, and his name was the Earth Keeper. And he looked at me and smiled, and I knew I had to do it. And I looked at the realtor, and that afternoon we bought the land. The spirits of the land spoke to me, and it was very clear it was not meant to be hoarded. It was meant to be shared. And again, I go back to the greatest teacher is the earth itself. And we've seen that for years. People come to that land, and it just does something to them. So I'll let that in. Now, the Earth Caretaker Way, what this book's about. If I had my dream come true, my ultimate dream, it would be that people would start to wake up every morning of their lives and they would have a life purpose. And that would be to care for our planet, like she cares for us. It's already in us from our ancestors. It's just buried. It's there. And you might ask, how does that look? It can look a million ways. It doesn't matter if you're the richest person in the world, if you're the poorest, or anything in between. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. Everyone can care for the earth. It's one of those things I think could unite people somehow or another in a magical way. It could unite people. I think of what are other things that are like that in the world. I write about it in the book, like trees. Who doesn't like trees? Every human being loves trees. Who doesn't like flowers? Every human being loves flowers. Who doesn't like the ocean? Who doesn't like meadows of wildflowers? Who doesn't like Mount Shasta? Did anybody drive by or go by Mount Shasta and say it's ugly and I don't like it? It doesn't matter what your spiritual beliefs is, everybody, there are commonalities in humans. As divided as we are, as we know from today and how painful it has been. There's that. The earth is the thing that could bring us to our good place, our kind place, our loving place, our heart place. And so I'm a dreamer. That's part of my medicine. And I'm going to dream that someday that's going to happen. And we can never give up. So this book got birthed that way, with the idea that people would eventually take on caring for the earth as their purpose in life. And part of what happened to me too, how this came about, was so many adults and young people will come to me at my school and they're lost. They don't have a vision for their life. And I almost would feel guilty about it because I got my vision for my life when I was 9 years old. And how do you help someone as a teacher to find their vision? It's a question you ask yourself. And it's so important for people's being alive in this world to have purpose, right? And this is, I just learned this is a common purpose we can all have. And it gives us a reason to get up every morning and live life fully. And it doesn't take away from any other purpose you might have. Your family, your work, whatever else you love to do. It only enhances it and makes it better. And you could certainly have more than one purpose in life. But the one we can all have is fighting for the earth, caring for the earth, loving the earth, building a personal relationship with the earth. So I'm hoping this book will somehow or another get found by enough people, or the right people, along its journey. And I'm hoping that people like you guys, if you buy the book or have read it already here, will spread the word of the Earth Caretaker Way. And I'm hoping at some point it'll catch on and become a norm around the entire world. And the reason I believe it's possible, because we are it already. We just won't let it out. We won't access it. And if I'm wrong, people say, what if you're wrong? You're a dreamer, you know, what if you're wrong? If I'm wrong, the earth will be okay. We know what to do. And if we don't know something, we have enough intelligence and ability with our hands to create whatever we need to solve our problem of humans not caring for the earth, overpopulating the earth, using it up. We know how to handle this problem. And yet we have not been able to do it. But we never give up. That's in the book over and over. You can't get more profound than this. She said, never doubt that a small group of citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And if you study any great movement, any great idea, it started with one person or a group, and it grew. And she's right. That's why we can never give up, ever, no matter how bad it looks. And if it doesn't work out, and we don't get it together, the earth will handle it. It won't be pretty. And what makes me sad is not only will so many other animals and trees and plants and beings will have to suffer in the process, but it will come back around, I have no doubt. So this is a time for heroes. Today was a dark day for a lot of us who love the earth. But she's a patient being. And I know we can come back around from it. In fact, sometimes the darkest days birth the greatest light. I've seen that in life. And we can never give up, and it'll eventually, something bigger than us will catch on and help us to do what we do well, remembering what we already know, caring for the earth. So I hope this book will be a little inspiration around that. There's so, in working on this book, something that's really, really, really made me feel hopeful is I've called lots of people, talked to lots of people, met lots of people. I am blown away by how many people are working in the world, for social justice and for the earth. Sometimes when you're doing stuff like this, you feel like you're alone. I'm not alone. There are people all over, all ages, types, colors, shapes, religions, beliefs. They're out there. They're doing it. Another great book that was written, Paul Hawkins, great guy. He started an incredible organization around saving the earth, but his book was called Blessed Unrest. It's about how many millions of people are fighting and caring for the earth, the social justice, out of nowhere. They're not part of a government. They're not part of even an organization like the Sierra Club or anything else. Just people like you and me just deciding to get up and change the world forever. There are millions around the world. They just don't make the headline news. So you're not alone, guys. Nobody's alone. And I get asked a lot is, how can I do it daily in my life? And the last section of this book is a life of service. It's about a life of service. And in our outdoor school, one of the things we teach the kids and the adults is one of the greatest things you can ever do in the world is be of service. give back. That's one of the highest places a person can go. And the earth is the incredible gift that just can keep receiving our service, right? And so a life of service, it's about giving back over and over. And in the process, the way life works, all that goodness comes back to you. It all comes back full circle. In service, you don't do it for fame, you don't do it for glory, you don't do it for money, you don't do it for power. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And it all comes back. If nothing else, you feel incredibly good about yourself when you look in the mirror. And that's okay. Because we also write in this book about how incredible you are. I want to read just a couple things from the book, then I'll take questions. You guys, one of the problems I've had a lot is I can talk forever. I'm sorry, but and I don't like time, but it is a store, they do want to close. So let me just read a couple things. Well, I'll tell you about the book. The book, it was made with the art in it to really inspire any page you open. And I wrote it so that you could read it from front to back and really study it and learn the things that are taught in it. But I also wrote it where you could pick up any page and just see a beautiful picture or some saying. And it hopefully will touch you in some way. And I've had people call me up and talk to me and tell me that it's been working. So it's really exciting. And I want this book, I want you to have it like out in the woods. I want you to get it dirty. I want you to get it wet. I want you to get snow and rain on it, bugs all over it. I want it to be like this book here, which is, I can barely keep the cover on anymore. Bradford Engineer's book, you know. I want it to be that way. It becomes, like one of the things we talk about in the book is your personal medicine. Our Native American ancestors, they called your personality. And your personality to them was your life experience becomes who you are, your medicine. And I want it to be like that. I want it to inspire you in that way. And so hopefully you'll be able to pick any page and look at it and read something, and it'll make you think and touch you. Like I just opened this page. It says sacred space. If you sit in a place, if chills come across your back, if your heart pounds, if your body feels excitement, if your body feels at home, if an animal visits you, if you have an epiphany, if you know you are in the right place, if this place feels like your place, then you know it's sacred space. Then stay a long while. We teach a lot in our school about sit spots, places that call to you. And you just go be in those places, and then you learn by being there, by observing. That's what that's about. Okay, open to this one. The earth shows love by providing a home, food, water, shelter, air, gravity, companionship with other species, and boundless beauty to thrive in. Being self-reliant is a form of earth caretaking. Bringing the old skills alive is a way to connect personally with the earth, even if you don't need them to live your life. Do it for fun. Everything you do adds to who you are and creates a stronger relationship with our living home. The book is broken into 4 sections. The first is nature awareness. The second, nature awareness is it's about building our relationship with the earth, bringing alive our senses, way bigger than they are now. Learning to walk on the earth, learning to observe, and so much more. Some of the chapters are awaken your senses, communicate with nature, connect with plants and their elementals, tend a garden, build human-animal relationships, be curious and play, have a sit spot, soak in the magic hours, photograph nature, and grok nature, which means becoming something else. Grokking means becoming something else. That came from an old book too. The next section is wilderness living skills. Master wilderness living skills. Follow tracks. Conquer false fear. That's so much of what keeps us from going to nature. False fear. False evidence appearing real. That's the acronym. False evidence appearing real. Follow tracks. Conquer false fear. Get to know the dark. Get off the trail and seek adventure. Part 3 is Earth philosophy, the spiritual side of nature. Open your heart. Go into the mystery. Greet sacred moments. Recognize power animals. Honor elements as living beings. Reverence for trees. Pilgrimage to the wilderness land holds energy. Collect earth medicine. Create nature art. Call on your ancestors. Acknowledge death and grieving. I've been in that chapter quite a bit today. I feel I've been there today. Death and grieving. And the last, and perhaps what the basics of this book is about, is a life of service. Follow the Scout Earth Caretaker Way, which really means being a leader in this. Not waiting for somebody else or somebody else to do something, but doing it. Rite of passage. Vision quest. Make kindness your way of life. Manifest your dream life. Educate yourself. That's hard today. Gather community. Seek mentors and be a mentor. Nature as teacher. Nature as healer. Nature as friend. Live in gratitude. Gratitude brings it all full circle, so it stays with you. When you experience gratitude, even if it's just taking a moment to look at a flower growing out of a crack in a sidewalk, taking that moment is huge. It's huge. It's life-changing. One thing I've learned from this work, some of the greatest payoffs from it, are the simplest things you never consider important. They're so simple you can't even believe it. And we don't do it often. And then finally, the Earth Caretaker Way movement, starting the movement, which I talked about. Okay, a couple more and then we're going to take questions. I opened this page. It's called Honor Elements as Living Beings, the chapter. This is called Earth. Digging a hole in the soil changes thousands of lives. The soil of the earth is a living thing. As we dig, acknowledge the life we change. Have gratitude and appreciation. Smell, feel, look deeply. This dirt is our ancestor. One day we will be the dirt. There was a series of books also that came out in the 70s, I believe, that like plants. And that book did what I'd always been waiting for. Science proved what we already know. That plants are living beings, that they recognize us, that they have personalities, that they can communicate with us, they can hang out with us, they understand us, they watch us. That book did that. And then they did it on the soil. And I realized, even being a gardener growing up, I didn't know how incredibly full of life the soil is. You could dig one shovelful of dirt and you put it under a microscope and there could be 1,000 beings living in it. And then they tried to do the earth spirits, teach people how to see and feel elementals. That's one of the hardest things I've ever done as a teacher. And they wrote that book too, that group. So it was amazing that way. What is honor? Honor is the goodness and the rightness inside of you. Honor defines you and how you show up in life. Living a life of honor is living your personal core values. You are a keeper of your honor. Keep it safe, keep it alive. Never ever damage it. Nothing can take it from you. Keep it in a good way, in a good place. Protect it as you would protect what you love. I don't think it's an accident I opened that today. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, I'm wrapping up with this. I told you I worked with birds of prey my whole life. And years ago when I moved from Santa Cruz, I left the wildlife rescue I started. And I was gifted an owl by them, a great horned owl that was permanently injured. And I wanted to use her for education, so I trained her to be on the glove, and I would go talk to people, and show her. And she had a great home and a good life. It wasn't like the wildlife, but it was a good life. And we named her Luna, our owl. Many of our students knew her. And this is when she died, and Gene wrote this. This is going to be so hard. Oh, God. Luna flew yesterday. Her soul flew from her aged body. Her wing healed, her spirit free from cages. It is a deeply intimate experience to share the passing of a physical being's life, be it human or animal, to cradle a wild owl who in health would never allow such intimacy, who in dying relinquished all wildness to human kindness, was an honor. As she was weakened on Saturday, and we knew for sure she was dying, we wrapped her in our towel and brought her inside. I couldn't bear the idea of her dying on the floor of her cage. The talons that in health would break one's arm softened. She could barely keep her eyes open. Her breathing was shallow. She hadn't eaten in a while, so she wasn't getting water. We gave her a few droppers full of water. It was a rainy and windy day. We sat by the fire holding her gently. She survived the night, but barely. Her head bobbed like a newborn baby, and like a newborn, we had to hold it. It dawned on me, hold on. It dawned on me that she didn't want to die inside. She didn't know inside. So in my PJs and slippers, I took her outside into the rain and the wind. Wrapped in a towel, the wind blew her feathers, and she half opened her eyes. She moved her bobbing head to the north, to the west, to the south, as if bowing to the directions in solemn prayer, breathing in the wildness of the day, feeling the rain on her back, and then releasing her head back into the towel. I held her close and told her it was time to let go, as if she were human. I was amazed at her tenacity for life. I watched as her breathing became gulps and then 2 breaths, her eyes opened, and she was gone. Unlike our reciprocated love of dogs or other domesticated animals, a wild animal only knows the wild, even in captivity. Luna was wild. Our bond was symbolic. The last day of her life, we viscerally exchanged energy. Perhaps I anthropomorphized her head bows to the 3 directions, but it seemed clear to me that life's meaning was sacredly shown, profoundly simple and complex, a fleeting moment of understanding that words hold no power to describe, and therein lies the power of symbols and power animals. I honor Luna for a life not necessarily fully lived with her broken wing, but well lived in the company of humans. Gene Sade. That's a lot about what this book's about. It's connecting so deeply to the earth and all things. And I'll just wrap by saying, all things are living. You could do this with insects, with plants, every animal. And that's one of the things I think when we're remembering what we already know from our native ancestors, they knew that. They knew that everything was alive and was important and touched us. I ask you all to take the time tomorrow to go be with some animal like that. Go be with an insect. Next time a fly comes into your house, usher it out. Don't just kill it all the time. If you see a spider on the corner in your wall, take it outside if you don't want it in there. Don't just squash it. Simple things change the world. Don't take every weed. They want to live too. Some can go. Give them a blessing and a prayer when you do and a thankfulness. But leave some. Wildness is important. It's important for our hearts, the human heart, to have wildness. It's important for the earth to keep its wildness in all its being.